Hello, hello, and as always, it's a pleasure to have one of my musical mothers, Miss Isola Jones here. And today I actually don't have anything to really talk to her about because I've been receiving viewer questions about technique things they want to learn from one of the greatest vocalists of her generation. And so, welcome back.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So,
Missed you. Missed you.
likewise, likewise. And so it won't be this long next time, I promise.
Okay.
So the first question is that we've talked about super high notes, we've talked about low notes. Is it, but you always say the middle voice is where the magic happens. What are your recommendations for getting a marble middle voice?
Well, I'm still taking lessons at this age, and I have learned something that I should have learned, or I'm sorry, I didn't learn 40 years ago. There is a term called the coup de glotte, Coupdeglotte. And the coup de glotte prevents you. You're starting the sound with the vocal folds closed. So it's literally a glottal stop. E, o, u. What this does when you take a good breath, it keeps you from using too much breath. It gives you an initial sound that is very, very efficient. When you're singing through the middle voice, this is what needs to happen. And it is a gradual thing to meld the registers. I use the term chest register, head register, but it should all sound the same. And in order to bridge that gap, you've got to be very efficient through the DMZ. It depends, different people have different breaks in different areas. But those places where the voice gets kind of breathy and doesn't have any support, the coup de glotte will start to strengthen those muscles. There's two sets of muscles, M1, M2. I believe M1 are the muscles that support chest register. M2 are those muscles that support head register. They have to be coordinated. It's like a relay race. So you're running and running and running, and you have to hand off the baton without tripping to the next person. Well, that's what the coup de glotte will give you. And you will feel absolutely grounded so that the bottom helps the top. The bottom helps the top. It's the glue that helps the top. So the high notes just pop out. It's not pushing the voice, but it is this sort of teeter-totter. It's a process. Be encouraged, but that is what needs to happen so that the registers meld. The top helps the bottom, but more so, the bottom helps the top. Then you will feel every note in the same spot. Because where are the vocal folds? They're here. They're here. They are sitting inside the larynx on top of the trachea. They transverse from front to back inside the larynx. Every note that you will ever sing, these twin enfoldings of mucous membrane. Every note. And it's controlled by this. And this, of course. But not this. Not this.
Okay. And so the next question is, and I think that's a good segue about the sound being further back. Um, One of our favorite singers, one of my personal favorites as well, Miss Norman was often criticized for the sound sounding too far back at times. I read her book and her technique was rooted in, I think it was the few studied the French and German techniques. And so my question for you, and this is a question from the viewers as well, is there different schools or different houses of technique. So how would you differentiate, say, the American technique that Leontine or Eleanor Stieber grew up learning as opposed to the German or French technique that some others have learned, if there even is a difference?
I would not say that Leontine Price or Eleanor Stieber had an American technique. Theirs was rooted in bel canto and excellent bel canto. They might have been Americans, but their technique was definitely Italian. The problem with the German singers that I've heard is that they're trying to use acoustical resonance instead of real resonance. They open too far, they speak in the back. You want to open in the back, but you don't want to speak back there. And the difference between, Jessie having a German technique is that she didn't speak back there. It was like a cavern. I mean, you were just mesmerized when you saw her, singing. How did she do that? But the voice was always, it was never covered. It was never swallowed. It was pristine and huge and with a myriad of colors. She had a fantastic technique. Voice always creamy. And it was huge. Voice is big. Now, I've heard some other German singers, specifically mezzos, who just, no. It's swallowed. It's monochromatic. It's just like one color, and it's not good. So I don't know. And then it also involves kind of a lot of stiffness, and it's artificial. It's not authentic. And the bel canto, 100 years ago, or even longer, maybe 120 years ago, I don't think that parents who had promising prodigies sent them to schools. They sent them to a private teacher. And they may spend 6 months on the vowels because each vowel feels differently. The closed vowels feel very sort of gathered. The open vowels feel sort of hollow. And how to balance that so that every vowel is pure. 6 months. Can you imagine doing that today? You've got to learn the fundamentals. And everyone wants to live in the penthouse, but if you don't have the floors beneath you, you're still on the ground floor.
I've heard people describe the French technique, like in a lot of books I've read also, as a very forward or a very nasal style of singing. Would you agree with that?
Okay, that's the way you speak it. That's not how you can sing it. No, you can't do that. You have to sing. The only people that really actually sing French well are French-speaking singers. Regine Crespin, José Van Damme, Nathalie Dessay. Maybe there's another wonderful coloratura. I can't think of her name right now. But they make a compromise, and that they do not nasalize those vowel sounds. They aim more towards Italian, an Italian open sound, and definitely for Americans, because Americans don't speak French, and French is a language that is not encouraged, or no other language other than English is encouraged in the United States. But it's a gorgeous, gorgeous language. You just cannot put all of those nasals in there. You can't do that. It just cuts off the resonance. You want a big open sound. You can't do that. So it is more Italianate, especially on the open vowels, has to be.
And just speaking, this is like a personal question, but just thinking of like Jesse Norman and those kinds of sopranos like her. Oh, I've read a lot about them. So like her, Flagstad, what's the other one? Trouble. You familiar with Helen
Yeah,
Trouble?
Helen Trouble. What about
Yeah.
Birgit Nielsen?
Well, she doesn't. So this is one of the things that they said set her apart. So like a lot of those women, like Trouble, Norman, they would say like there were some issues at the top. So like above high A. Is that just like a common thing for like women with that heavy of a voice?
Actually, it shouldn't be. Because again, in the golden age, contraltos had a high C. And I wouldn't even say that it's a vocal issue because most issues with the voice are not really with the voice. The voice is a product of your imagination. I have a baritone, and he's great. He's a great singer. You know, we were vocalizing, and we would go up to a high. You know, we go up to a G sharp, and then the A couldn't sing the A. I said, well, what's wrong? He said, can you imagine singing the A? And he gave me a very honest answer. He said, no. I said, well, you need to start imagining it. The top, I don't know what they imagine how it should be. I think what they think is that as the notes ascend, it should be getting bigger and bigger, and they're open and open and open. But if you listen to Price sing a high C, it's like a sliver of sound. And then she might open it up with resonance, with real resonance, but it's not like a canon. It's not, but that's what Birgit Nielsen did. Hers was different. She had a completely different point of view. Because in her biography, autobiography, she didn't start out singing very well. Her mother was a good singer. And she was having problems singing the top. She went in the kitchen, her mother's washing dishes. I think this is what happened. Her mother's washing dishes, and she said, I can't sing this note. And her mother just, she was, washing the forks and spoons and knives. She just sang at a high C. She said, do it like that. Okay. Because I think that we have an idea of what it's supposed to feel like. What it's supposed to feel like. Because we don't really hear ourselves accurately. Because if we did, we wouldn't do half of the stuff that we do. If you feel the voice and you believe that it should feel differently, then you're going to try to make it do something differently and completely miss the mark. As you're approaching high C and above, it goes into this hyper kind of not a whistle stop, but it goes into this hyper, very fine, but it is connected to the rest of the voice, but it is not like this. You're not going to feel this. You're going to feel this. Different from the party tricks of a lot of pop singers, which is it's like a cipher. It's not moving. It's just like this sort of whistle stop. The girls who sing like Queen of the Night, those Fs are not a cipher. They have resonance. They have vibrato. But to really answer your question, I think, in my opinion, it's that they envision singing those notes in a way that is not correct, which prevents them from a really ascending higher than but Tabaldi was like that too. Had what they called in those days, maybe in the 60s, the short top. But that's here. That's out here. The vocal cords don't care what note you sing, but you cannot force them and you can't abuse them. They will rebel.
I have like two more questions from the viewers, but this is a good segue into the next one. So this is if you feel comfortable answering it. We've had some women come on the channel, and they've talked about like how their voices have changed as they've gotten older. Um, and so a lot of them talk about pregnancy and menopause, two things that many women deal with. From your experience, not necessarily personal, but just talking with your colleagues or whatever, what how would you describe how menopause generally affects women?
Well, every woman is different. When I went through menopause, I didn't have night sweats. I didn't have any kind of, it came and went. I was glad not to have my menses anymore.
What age
Um,
were you, if you don't mind me asking?
I was about 45.
Oh, that's young, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no. I mean, there are some women who have babies at 50. That's unusual. After the age of 37 or 38, any pregnancies are called geriatric pregnancies. So women having babies after the age of 45 or 50 is unusual. That's what's unusual. I think menopause, anything that changes your metabolism can have an impact. My question is, what kind of technique did they have before menopause? If they had a solid technique, menopause should not be, barring any other kind of health issues, should not really have an impact. That should not necessarily make their vocal cords swell up, but maybe some people do. I don't know. I really don't know. It didn't really affect me physically.
Was it?
Also, let me interject this. The people who sing professionally, generally speaking, are natural singers. We see them on these competitions, right? The America's Got Talent, The Voice, whatever. And they get up and they're 19 years old or they're 20 years old and it's perfect. It's perfect. Maybe even later if they're a gospel singer, maybe in their 40s. Perfect. I call them Methodists. They have created a method of singing that works for them because it absolutely does. But again, as we go into the senior years, it is imperative, if you want to continue to sing, it is imperative that you know the rules of the road. Because what you could get away with, kind of pushing the voice and having a little tension here and there, the voice sounds so good, people didn't care. The best example that we have of that is Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston, amazing, amazing voice. There is a video, I don't know if you've seen it. She's singing, there Pavarotti, Sting, Elton John, and Whitney Houston. And they're all singing La Donna è mobile. She sings a phrase, and she sounds like an opera singer. It was amazing. She had an amazing voice. Then she took a decade off and, who knows what, and had a comeback. And the voice was like, a bowl of Rice Krispies, snap, crackle, and pop. Come on, we know this is the truth. So it would have been possible to rehabilitate that voice. But I posit that she sang just from her soul. She just sang. She wasn't thinking technique. She was just thinking, make a gorgeous sound, make a heartfelt, soul-filled sound. Not thinking about the tongue, not thinking about chest voice or head voice or anything. Just opened her mouth and it was perfect. But you could always hear a little tension in the sound. You could still hear it, but it was like, okay, everything else is so great. Okay, I'm not going to nitpick. But if you don't take care of those things, and if you're not singing or you're doing things that mitigate against singing well, anything that would dry out those twin foldings of mucous membrane How much do you like to sing? Are you willing to give up caffeine in all of its forms? Are you willing to give up that extra glass of wine? Are you willing to stop smoking? Because there were singers, Caruso smoked. Monserrat Caballé was a chain smoker of unfiltered Camels. What sacrifices are you willing to make? So these are the little things. So I'm not so sure that it was menopause that put a pause on their singing well. My question is, how were they singing before? And that menopause, if it affected them physically, just was, something that put the nail in the coffin.
What is her name? I think Varney. Varney wrote in her book that like after she went through menopause, the biggest change was losing a couple notes at the top. And I've heard a few other women say that, just losing a couple notes at the very top.
No, no,
Really?
no. If you sing well, listen, I just celebrated my 75th birthday. I've got a great high C and C sharp and D. That's not by accident. That's not by, not taking injections. That's called a technique that will allow you to use all of your voice. So I posit again, these singers, wonderful careers, great instruments, sing, have a method, but it is not the correct method. And therefore, going through changes with your body, with your metabolism, with your hormones, should have no effect on the vocal cords. That the problem is not the vocal cords, it's not the voice. Again, it's here. It's how do you imagine your voice? How do you imagine to sing? What kinds of things are you doing? Is there any tension? You sang those notes before with a lot of tension and it sounded good. Now you try to sing it with that same amount of tension and it's not so good because it wasn't good in the first place. So what was your question?
It was just wondering, like a lot of people wonder like how menopause, like, affects these singers. And, but you did also say every woman is different. But because I think about somebody like Patti LaBelle, and she still has essentially the range has remained unchanged. If you ask her, right, called her up right now and said, Patti, can you do a high D flat? She would, you know, the but what's interesting about Patti is the range is basically the same, can still sing everything in the original keys, but like it's become like a head voice essentially throughout the entire instrument. So anytime she has to sing, I would say above F at the bottom of the staff. So F in the fourth octave is essentially like a head voice now. So she doesn't have the chest anymore, which I think is really, really interesting. It's really interesting.
Patti LuPone on Broadway. She's in her 70s
Hmm.
and still rocking it.
Y'all on the
Okay.
same age. I just saw her a few months ago,
Right.
actually.
All right. I mean, she's still rocking it. And Patti LaBelle has gotten the
She'll be
idea.
81. Yeah.
She's got the right idea. She doesn't have to sing this at 81 the way she did it at 41. If she wants to continue to sing and sing well, which is a lesson that many people need to learn. If it's as we celebrate birthdays, we should not be diminishing. We should sing well, and you have to make wise choices and understand she's singing pop music. She's not singing classical music. She's singing pop music. You would do that in classical music. That's what you do in classical music. And because she wants to preserve her voice. She wants to sing as long as she can. God bless her. That is wisdom. You don't want to see an 81-year-old woman just go out there and croak. Come on. You want to see her use her brain and sing well.
All right. And the last question is just something for you to provide some commentary on. So you come up during a special era when classical singers were cutting a lot of records, and many of them created pop records. So like Marilyn Horne has one. I can see a tenor he has one. Leontine Price has one, and so on and so forth. And so Marilyn Horne did an interview one time, and she said, "Well, when I grew up listening to pop music, they actually sang." So and so I think about somebody like a Dionne Warwick, like whose music was written by composers Hal Bacharach and
Burt
Hal
Bacharach.
yeah, and Hal David, yes. And so like her music, they worked with classical singers as well before coming to do the pop stuff. But from your point of view, when or what changed where the that kind of singing just became out of fashion?
In the 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s, you had Rodgers and Hammerstein, Lerner and Lowe, Harold Arlen, all of these composers, and there was a style of writing songs. I guess we had 8 measures or 16 measures, and then it was like an ABA kind of format. They were writing music for people who were classically trained. So the music that they wrote, the songs that they wrote, had at least an octave range. Even a recitative and aria, for instance, with the song Somewhere Over the Rainbow, it has a verse. Over the rainbow is the refrain. So it's like recitative and aria, okay? And so there was this format, and singers could sing more than one octave. Who was his name? Robert Goulet could have sung opera. All of these great singers that sang these musicals were accomplished and well-trained singers, or just very, very gifted singers. What happened was the pedagogy and shortcuts and not paying attention or just using people up. What is happening is that you have, with the exception of maybe Audra McDonald and Patti LuPone, you have actors and actresses who are primarily dancers and actors who can sing, but you don't have really any real singers. There is Cynthia
Arrivo, yes, Cynthia Arrivo.
Cynthia Erivo, who is phenomenal. Voice tends to be, I love her singing, but it tends to be sort of one-dimensional, very, very impressive, but very kind of nasal. That's okay, because what she's doing it well. I got no complaints. But 50 years ago, 60 years ago, you would want a sound that was a little bit more fleshed out. And this is what they did. So the problem is the pedagogy. You don't have singers that can sing more than an octave. If there was great teaching and great learning, then you would have composers writing for those voices. Mozart did not write for the singers until the cast got there. Because why write something nobody can sing? Right? So this is what has happened. I won't say it's been the dumbing down of an industry, but it gets more and more restrictive because people don't have the skills to sing an octave or two octaves. There are a few. I'm not saying them, I'm not using sort of a broad brush, but there aren't that many who can sing and sing well two octaves. They may have a good octave and they have a kicking fifth. but but you have to be able to sing long, sweeping lines. And they're not writing that. They're writing. Stephen Sondheim wrote, was it Bring in the Clowns? For a person who couldn't have had no voice. Short phrases. Short phrases. You know, that's what happens when there's no one to really sing the music. And you want to put on a musical.
I don't know how often you're on social media, but you know, there are like a lot of you social media vocal coaches and everything. And a common thing that you'll just see a lot of is a lot of people are pushing for that, you know, that very bright, very forward sound. So I think it's just a matter of, like you mentioned earlier, like back 50, 60 years ago, you wanted a whoosh of sound, but now everybody wants that, you know, the forward, bright, I guess, nasal sound.
And that's a shame. That it
Mhm.
has its place. It has its place. It has its place, perhaps on Broadway. I don't know. I just think that it's a shortcut. It's a shortcut. And it has to involve, and it does involve a lot of tension. A lot of tension. And those individuals are also highly mic'd. They sing lots and lots of performances every week. So they aren't really producing, it's not a full-bodied, in terms of singing, it's not a full-bodied engagement. And I think that they probably are exhausted. They're exhausted. The voices are tired.
And so, just out of curiosity, do you consider Ethel Merman a great singer?
Ethel Merman was Cole Porter's favorite singer. She was effective, but then at the end, come on, but at the end of her career, so instead of having a wobble on top, she had a wobble in the middle. There's no business. Like, come on.
So how did that happen? Because I think she's from an era where you have to do what she did without a microphone. And for some reason, I feel like when I hear her, I'm just like, I don't like that sound.
Right.
And then I'm like, but a lot of people don't think Patti LuPone sounds great, but I heard Patti in person and I was like, okay, well, this is a voice you have to hear in person. So I was like, I wonder if that's the same for Ethel, because obviously she's like revered.
She might have started out probably as a young woman, and that kind of sound like that worked. And music for Broadway was very syllabic, which means that every note had a syllable on it. It was very text driven. It wasn't voice driven like classical music. There were no melismas, singing a line on one vowel for, 3 or 4 pages. It wasn't like that. Every bat, 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 very text driven. And so for that reason, you understood every word, but then it was driven with a lot of tension. So that when she did, after a certain amount of time, it had a wobble because these delicate little muscles here are not designed to support the sound. These big muscles back here are designed to support the voice and the body. But if everything is driven here, the larynx is doing this. It's worn out because it's supposed to be an effect, not a cause.
But even still, like somebody like Patty LaPone, who I think is the closest we have to like an Ethel in some regards. You know, every time she sings, even at her youngest, and even now, it's like,
It's tongue tension, but she can still she can still go, and she can ascend the scale.
mm-hmm,
She can ascend the scale, kind of like Patty LaPone. I mean Patty LaBelle, excuse me, Patty LaBelle. She can also ascend the scale. Is it perfect?
mm-hmm.
You know, they're not perfect. There's no way to get it, anything perfect on this plane of existence. Even Leontine, she maintained a spectacular top, but through the middle, she made some compromises, which I think affected the sound a little bit. It got a little sort of out of focus and a little kind of swallowed because that those exercises to strengthen the middle voice needed to, somebody pay attention to that. So people make their choices. You can choose to be content with what you're doing. It's working. Okay. But to ascend to the best you can do takes time, takes patience, and takes attention. That has to be your goal to make your voice as authentic and natural and free as possible. But that comes with a technique. You're not going to sort of muscle your way there. That's not going to happen.
Well, that is all for me and the
Okay.
viewers, so I can't wait to present it to them, man. We'll schedule something else. You know, we always love having you here.
Oh, my pleasure.
Someone else just said, when is Isola going to provide her Mariah commentary? So I just
I think I
so
already can.
yes, but we only talked about the early career, not where she's at today. Or where she, so but I'll be in touch, of course, and I'll keep working on well, everything. So I'll talk to you really, really soon. Thank you
All right,
again.
darling. Well, Happy New Year.
Same to you. Bye.
All right, darling.